This was the first passage in the mock. It was about this Austrian physicist called Erwin Schrödinger. Now, this is the same guy of whom you must have heard. He came up with this world famous paradox, which is known as Schrödinger's cat. You must have come across that term. Anyhow, the passage dealt with Schrödinger's book. That's what the first paragraph started with, a book called What is Life? But then the focus or the focal point of the paragraph was not the book. Instead, it was, as is given later in the passage, this person called Sidney Brenner, who's a distinguished molecular biologist, and he's also a pioneer in the field of genetics. This person, this professor, his views about molecular and then developmental biology, about how we have still just touched the fringes of, let's say, biology, or we have not done a lot of work. But then anyway, this is what the passage deals with. His comments, his views about how life, the origin of life, is still a mystery to most of us, and this is why Brenner's comments have been connected to that particular book, which is Schrodinger's book, What is Life? So the book, in fact, is not the focal point. It's kind of an introduction to eventually Brenner's comments or Brenner's views in the passage. And this is what the passage was all about. Let's jump to the first question then in the mock. The question wanted to know what was the author's primary purpose for writing this passage. Now, whenever it comes to a question which wants to know the primary purpose or the theme or the central idea, we know that one singular fact which has been mentioned in the passage cannot be the primary purpose. This was the case with option A, which we can safely eliminate because it only talks about the lack of knowledge regarding integrative actions of living organisms. Yes, developmental biology has not gone too ahead. It did say that we still do not know about a lot about the integrative actions of living organisms, but this is only one point in case in the entire passage, and that is why we can safely eliminate this particular option. What about option B? It says criticize the surprising lack of information on molecular biology. No, rather, if you went back to the passage, you could see that it talks about this kind of biology, which is the field of genetics and then molecular biology, making a lot of progress. See, it says here in this particular line, molecular biology, it says succeeded also because there were simple model systems and stuff like that. So we know that molecular biology has succeeded. It has a lot of information in the field, so we cannot criticize the passage does not criticize the surprising lack of information. This is in contradiction to the views in the passage, and therefore we can eliminate option B too. What about option C? It says explore the reasons for the popularity of the book by Erwin Schrödinger. Now, I already told you while introducing the passage that the book is only, let's say, a mere example, or it's a kind of an introduction. Sometimes an author might, introduce a passage by laying down an example, or let's say an example, for in this case an example of a book, and then he goes on to connect that particular point with his eventual focal point or the central idea of the passage. It's exactly that what has happened here. The author mentions Erwin Schrödinger's book called What is Life, and that is what is the focal issue is. In that he then connects the theme, which is what is life, or do we really know about life still, and then he connects this to Edward Brenner's comments that we still do not know much about life. So that is why C cannot be the point here, that he wants to explore the reasons for the popularity of the book by Erwin Schrödinger. No, Erwin Schrödinger's book is not the focal point of not the central idea or the primary purpose of the passage. Let's then it boils down to D, option D, but then let's read it. It says describe the state of our knowledge in the field of biology. This is exactly what the passage is all about. The author wants us to know that our knowledge in the field of biology is still limited. We still, as I said earlier, we have just touched the fringes of the vast information that is available there in the field of biology. But then that's what he says, that even though molecular biology may have, let's say, gone on ahead, for a while, but then developmental biology, we know very less about it. there are no support systems for developmental biology, or at least were not there when this passage was written, and that's what he talks about in the entire passage. So we mark option D as the answer to this particular question. This is the primary purpose of the passage. Let's deal with this question now from the passage, from the first passage in the mock, which wants to know which of the following can be inferred from the passage. Now, option A says, before Schrödinger, the genetic structure of organisms was not studied at all. Now, can you really say that? Absolutely no, because, or absolutely not, because in the passage, all it mentions is that Erwin Schrödinger was an iconoclastic physicist, and that he was, let's say, one of the people who actually contributed a lot to conceptual issues in biology, and as it says that he stood at the pivotal point of history when physics was, let's say, helping in giving birth to new science of molecular, to the new science of molecular biology. But nowhere does it say that that molecular biology, or let's say as the option here says, that genetic structure of organisms was not studied at all. So we don't have data enough in the passage to give us that particular option. We cannot assume it, and that is why we can rule out option A. We can say that this was not so. What about option B? It says the unraveling of the genetic code has not really helped understand developmental biology. Now, if you've read the passage, you must have come across at least this point, that the understanding of developmental biology till the time that the passage was written was not much. If you pay attention here, it says that developmental biology has no such support as molecular biology had. And then further it says that we have not, as it says here, understood the vital integrative actions of living organisms. So we have support for this point at least, that integrative systems of life have not been fully understood by us, and that is why the option here, option B, is the correct one, which says the unraveling of the genetic code has not really helped understand developmental biology. Let's check out even then the other two options. It says the relationship between genes and development can be successfully explored through molecular biology. And the passage says that molecular biology has really advanced, but then it does not explain that, or it does not mention that the relationship between genes and development can be explored through molecular biology. If I take you back to the passage here in the last paragraph, we have questions which have been put up by the author. For instance, he says that what is the relationship between genes and development? So we have not fully understood it. He goes on to say we have not understood these the vital integrative actions of living organisms. And then furthermore, this is an important line here which says not all the answers are available at the molecular level. So developmental biology does not have all of its answers from biology at the molecular level, and this is why we can eliminate option C again also, which makes us move on to option D now. It says new theories to understand integrative systems of life would be more complex as compared to earlier theories. Is this mentioned? Let's go back to that part of the paragraph. Here, the last line again. See, it says not all the answers are available at the molecular level, and then it says that the endless quest for knowledge is going to still continue. So we know that new theories, there is actually no talk about new theories being more complex than the ones which are right now, or which were there were earlier theories, and that new theories are going to be more complex. We do not know any such stuff which has been said through the passage, and that is why safely we can eliminate this option and we can move on to here there is this line, actually I was looking for that. I can point out this line for you here. It says we are, right here it says we are going to have to teach biologists another language which incorporates the highly integrated systems of life. So it does mention that there is let's say, scope for new theories, but then it does not say that these theories are going to be more difficult or more complex than the ones that already existed. And that's why we eliminate option D also, and we say safely that option B is the answer to this question. That is the only thing that can be inferred from the passage. Such questions are rare, but then they are a good application of what you have read in the passage. Had you read the passage on the whole, you would have been easily able to answer this question, which wanted to know that the author is most probably addressing which of the following audiences. This question is in line with the other kind of question sometimes that you get in mocks. For instance, you might be asked where does the passage come from? What might be the source of the passage? Is it a, let's say, a science magazine or a journal or a magazine for let's say laymen, or anything like that? It might have different options, or a book, let's say, or a research paper. Then sometimes you have questions which want to know what the next paragraph in the passage, the one not mentioned, or one not given, what might it probably contain, or what might it probably talk about. Sometimes you might be asked what is the question, what is the what is the question give from the options, which you would ask the author, which would connect probably to the theme of the entire passage. So you get questions like these, and this is one of those questions. Now, who do you think is the audience here? Is it molecular biologists? Is it geneticists? Is it laymen, general people, or is it subscribers to a science journal? Now, the answer to this question lies in, as I said, a basic reading of the passage, which, if you have done, it might have revealed to you that the passage was written in a very simple and easy manner. There were a lot of terms, yes, that were related to core biology, but then the language was very simple, and that very clearly suggests that the author is addressing a very general audience. So we can safely mark C, that is layman, as the answer. It cannot be molecular biologist, otherwise it would probably have gone over your head. That is the kind of terms or the usage or the jargon that the author might have used in the passage. Again, geneticists, it's the same thing with that option, that the passage must have been or should have been very, very complex to read, or very much into it must have used a lot of those terms, particular terms related to biology, which would have given the answer as, let's say, probably geneticist. But no, it's not that. It's very simple language, and that is why we can also eliminate subscribers to a science journal. It was not written in the way that a science journal is written. A journal would probably just report things. It would not have opinions as the passage has, and that is why we can also eliminate option D and safely go with layman as the answer for this question. This is one of the very frequent questions you must have been seeing on in the recent mocks. Of course, a lot of such questions also are asked on the actual paper. Which of the following best describes the tone of the author? See, now what I find when doing tone questions is that you must have a good vocabulary, because sometimes what happens is people do not even know the meanings of the options given, and that is why it's very difficult for them to speculate or to let's say make an educated guess towards what the actual tone has to be. If you've read the passage, you will form a fair enough idea of what or how the author has approached the passage, but then it is actually very difficult to do or do the question or get to a perfect answer if you have not understood the options themselves. Now, there were 4 words here. You have necessarily heard of pessimistic. Was the passage pessimistic or not? Was it speculative? Was he making a lot of guesswork? Or was it vituperative? Or was it factual? Now, let's go one by one and try and eliminate. A says speculative. Did you think, people, that while reading the passage that the author was making a lot of guesswork? Was he making speculations? towards the theory or towards his own viewpoints to the actual subject? No. So the tone was not speculative. It was not about guesswork in the passage, right? So what about pessimistic? We know that this means a negative outlook towards things, and if you safely cancel out B, you can also cancel out vituperative, because what vituperative means is highly critical, right? Now, if the passage is not pessimistic, there are very few chances that it can also be, not critical for that matter, because pessimistic would mean that the author had a very narrow or a negative viewpoint of the entire subject that was not seen here. He does mention that there are, let's say, there is a lack of knowledge in certain fields, particularly developmental biology, but he's not at all absolutely pessimistic about the whole issue. Neither is he critical. He has just, let's say, he has not attempted to predict the future. He has simply presented facts which are there in the passage, and that is why we can safely say that the answer to this question is D. That is, the tone of the passage has to be factual. There are a lot of simple. It's all about a simple presentation of facts from Schrodinger's book to the other guy Berger's, viewpoints in the passage, right? So that is why we know for sure that the Brenner's, I'm sorry, not Berger's, Brenner's viewpoint. So that's why we know for sure that the tone has to be factual. Now, this is one of the good questions in the first reading comprehension passage of the mock. It says the development of the passage is based on what? Now, what was the development based on? Was it based on progress made by molecular biology, or how did the author approach the entire passage? How did he develop his points? That is what we need to find out. Now, if you go back to the passage, to the very first paragraph here, as I said earlier, the author begins with an example of Erwin Schrödinger's book, and specifically what he does mention here is the name of the book, which is What is Life? And then he goes on to say that this book has generated a number of, let's say, issues, or generated a number of discoveries, like the unraveling in the second paragraph, in the unraveling of the genetic code by Francis and Crick. We have heard of these people. We have read their model of the DNA in science books in school. But then the point is that this is the point here in the second paragraph. But these advances did not bring biologists any closer to answering the question posed in the title of Schrodinger's book. So this is what the whole point of Schrodinger's book is all about. That he wants to pay us to pay attention, or he wants to lead our attention to the fact that, to the title of Schrodinger's book, which again here is What is Life, as I mentioned earlier, right? So this is the main point, and then he further develops the passage by giving us views of this distinguished professor called Sidney Brenner. That this person, his pioneering work has led to a lot of research, has led to a lot of new understanding in the evolution of, let's say, vertebrates, or resulted in new ways of analyzing gene sequences. It says that here in the last lines of this particular paragraph. But the point here is that eventually he uses that book and Sidney Brenner's comments to tell us that we have still not, let's say, completed our search, or completed, our knowledge, or gained full, access to knowledge about biology, specifically developmental biology, right? So that is what he's trying to say, that there are still great difficulties in the field. We have still not understood a lot of stuff about biology. That is what Brenner is eventually trying to say. As is mentioned here, I have marked these areas which he talks about. He says that not all the answers to developmental biology are available. Even though molecular biology may have advanced to a certain extent, developmental biology is still an endless quest for knowledge. That's what he says here in the very final line. And this is why, for this question, we cannot say that the development is merely by the progress made by molecular biology. He mentions the progress as one singular point in the entire passage. What about the relationship between genes and development? Again, he says that we still have not understood the relationship between genes and development. In the passage, he poses it as a question. He says, "What is the relationship between genes and development?" So he does not necessarily highlight that point. He says option C says evolution of complex structures. No, we can safely eliminate these three options and easily come up to option D as the answer, which I have been explaining. Brenner's comments in the context of the question posed in Schrodinger's book. This is the development of the passage through this particular point or through this particular way, right? So that's why we have for this question the answer as option D.